The first thing that tipped me off wasn't lipstick on a collar or some dramatic cliché. It was the way the guest towels in the downstairs bathroom had been refolded. Not the way I do it, or the way she does it, but with a clumsy, masculine roll, the kind that screams, "I dried my junk on this and didn't care." I stood there, staring at the sloppy folds like I was decoding some ancient script, and instead of feeling rage, all I felt was a hollow amusement, like watching a kid cheat at a board game thinking he's clever. Somewhere between the pristine soaps being slightly out of line and the faint whiff of a cologne I didn't wear, something cheap, something desperate, I understood that the fracture wasn't new. It had just gotten sloppy. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind that's supposed to smell like cut grass and lazy regret, but instead the house reeked of staged normalcy. She was in the kitchen, humming off-key, overcompensating, chopping tomatoes for some fake, "we're still happy" lunch she insisted on after weeks of weird silences and late-night work meetings. The light caught her wedding band just so as she slid the knife through the tomato's flesh, a glinting little lie wrapped around her finger, slicing clean through soft red pulp, and something in me cataloged the symbolism like I was filing it away for future reference. I didn't say anything because what's the point? When you catch a snake mid-slither, you don't stomp it immediately, you watch where it's going first. Later, while she was busy making some nauseating Instagram post about our cozy Sunday, I went to take the laundry upstairs, the laundry she insisted she'd already folded but somehow had forgotten in the basket by the stairs. Maybe she thought I wouldn't notice the extra pair of socks that weren't mine. Not just any socks, black ankle socks with a logo from some obscure gym on the other side of town, the kind of place she wouldn't set foot in unless someone had a really good bicep vein and low standards. I let my fingers brush over them, imagining the idiot who thought leaving evidence behind in a married woman's home was an acceptable risk. No anger, no shouting, just a quiet little inventory in my head, a click as the last piece of the puzzle dropped into place. Still, the crown jewel wasn't the socks. It wasn't even the towels. It was the playlist. Her sacred workout playlist that she always guarded like a state secret, suddenly playing in the background on the home speaker while she cooked. Except, there were new songs on it. Songs she hated. Songs she once ranted about in the car with me, calling them basic bro anthems for idiots who peaked in high school. Songs that, apparently, were now not just acceptable but blasted loud enough to vibrate the wine glasses in the cabinet. It was subtle, almost laughably dumb, like a serial killer leaving a signature at the scene, daring someone to notice. And notice I did. I didn't confront her, didn't accuse her, didn't even change my expression. I just sat through lunch, eating the salad she had laced with forced smiles and hollow laughter, nodding at her small talk about office politics, agreeing when she complained about the neighbor's dog, chuckling when she made a joke about how predictable men were. And the whole time, a slow, cold plan was knitting itself together behind my eyes. If she wanted to play me for a fool, I would let her believe she succeeded, just long enough to pull the ground out from under her. The most beautiful part? I wouldn't have to raise my voice or lift a finger. She was already rigging her own execution. All I had to do was nudge it along when the time was right. And believe me, it was going to be a masterpiece. For a while, I told myself that everything was fine, that these little tremors weren't the prelude to an earthquake. Life, on the surface, had never looked better. We went to Sunday brunches where she laughed too loudly at jokes she barely listened to. We posted those shiny, curated photos on social media like a glossy magazine spread for a life we were only pretending to live. She still touched my arm when she spoke, still kissed me goodnight, still asked if I wanted anything when she ran to the store, but her touches were mechanical, her kisses cold drafts of obligation. And the errands started to stretch longer and longer until I wasn't sure if she was picking up milk or just picking up excuses. She started throwing around words like boundaries and personal development, treating them like some kind of new age religion she had suddenly converted to without warning, preaching to me about how healthy relationships needed air to breathe. Even though it felt more like she was rolling down the windows and pushing me out while the car was still moving. Her work hours, once predictable and reasonable, bloomed into chaotic bursts of late nights and urgent meetings that she refused to explain, waving off my polite questions with the same tired smile you give a child asking why the sky is blue. And when I told myself I was overthinking it, when I grasped for normalcy like a drowning man reaching for driftwood, she gave me fresh fuel for my anxiety. Big, careless purchases showing up on our bank statements, designer shoes, hotel reservations in parts of town we had no reason to visit, memberships to yoga studios she never once set foot in before. She became a woman of new dreams, suddenly enamored with self-help books and weekend retreats that didn't allow spouses, because, she said with a slight wrinkle of her nose, some spaces are sacred, you know? I watched her in the mornings as she drank coffee and scrolled through her phone, her face lit up by something on the screen that wasn't me, wasn't us, wasn't the life we'd built brick by careful brick. Her laughter, once a sound that warmed the room, started to feel staged, timed wrong, like a badly dubbed movie. She changed her phone password without mentioning it, claiming she needed more digital privacy, as if I had ever once pried, and her social media accounts, once open windows into her daily life, now clicked shut like locked doors. She had a new bounce in her step, a new gleam in her eye, the kind that made her look like she was walking towards something or someone, just out of my view. I found a receipt crumpled under the passenger seat of her car one night while helping her bring in groceries, a receipt from a restaurant she said she hated, on a night she told me she was working late. It wasn't even the lie that hit the hardest, it was how sloppily it was hidden, like she didn't even bother to cover her tracks anymore, like I wasn't worth the effort. But still, I said nothing. I smoothed my face into something neutral, told myself she was just going through a phase, reassured myself that maybe I was the one being unreasonable, that love meant trusting even when the ground beneath your feet started to crack. She still smiled at me across dinner tables, still slipped her hand into mine when we walked through crowded streets, but her grip was loose, distracted, like she was already letting go and didn't want to make a scene. She was still there, in body, in voice, in routine, but something vital had been amputated, and the phantom pain of it throbbed harder with every passing day. I was living with a ghost wearing her face, sleeping beside someone whose dreams no longer included me, and deep down, I knew that the foundation was rotting, even as I pretended we could still build something real on top of it. I wanted to believe. God help me. I wanted to believe so badly that I smiled back every time she flashed that brittle grin, held on every time she pulled away, convinced myself that if I loved her harder, better, stronger, maybe I could patch the hole she had already decided to tear wide open. It happened on a Thursday night, the kind that should have been harmless, predictable, another mindless evening of scrolling through Netflix menus and pretending we were still the people we used to be. But fate has a way of choosing the mundane moments to rip your throat out. She told me she was going to a networking dinner for work, one of those vague, convenient professional obligations she had been pulling out of thin air more and more lately, and I told her to have a great time, smiled like a man sending his wife off to war. All calm, all supportive, all dead inside. She kissed my cheek without looking me in the eye, grabbed her bag, a new one, designer, one I didn't recognize and hadn't seen on any of our credit cards, and floated out the door in a cloud of expensive perfume that made my stomach turn. I watched her pull out of the driveway, then did something I had never done before in all the years we had been together. I opened the drawer where she kept her old iPad, the one she thought was broken. The one synced to her phone because she never bothered to turn off the automatic backup. It flickered to life, slow and stubborn, like it knew it was about to betray her. No code, no protection, just the bright, raw flood of her messages blooming across the screen like bloodstains on clean fabric. I wasn't looking for anything specific, at least, that's the lie I told myself, but what I found wasn't subtle or buried or complicated. It was right there, open, almost proud. Dozens of messages from someone saved under a name I didn't recognize, the kind of fake, lazy name you use when you're too arrogant to believe you'll ever get caught. I scrolled, detached, clinical, my heart rate steady, my mind filing away every disgusting emoji, every cheap pet name, every thread of conversations that painted the picture she never had the guts to show me to my face. Pictures, 2 selfies taken in our bedroom while I was at work, poses she had never once offered me, wearing lingerie she once claimed she didn't feel enough for. Promises whispered in text, dreams of escaping together, complaints about me written in the same snarky, cruel tone she used to reserve for gossipy brunches about strangers. She wasn't just cheating. She was living another life, dragging our marriage behind her like roadkill. But the final, merciless blow wasn't the messages or the pictures. It was a single screenshot she had sent him, a picture of our wedding photo, cracked and half-shoved into the back of a closet, captioned with the words, "Dead weight. Just a matter of time." I sat there, staring at it, feeling nothing at all, like a man reading his own obituary before breakfast. No rage, no sorrow, no bargaining. Just a cold, efficient click as something inside me shut down permanently. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even frown. I simply set the iPad down, wiped the screen clean of fingerprints like I was dusting a corpse, and leaned back into the silence of the empty house that no longer felt like a home. My mind began moving, slow at first, then gathering speed, a mechanical, merciless engine kicking to life deep in my bones. There would be no confrontation, no dramatic declarations, no pointless accusations hurled across a kitchen table she no longer deserved to sit at. She had already chosen her battlefield. She just didn't know yet that I had decided to win the war. As I sat there, hearing the faint ticking of the clock on the wall and the hum of the refrigerator, a plan began to stitch itself together with terrifying clarity. I wouldn't throw away my dignity for a woman who gave herself away for free. No, I would let her keep her lies, her cheap lover, her pathetic little fantasy life, and then I would rip them away, one calculated piece at a time, until she had nothing left but the wreckage she built with her own two hands. She thought she was clever. She thought she was untouchable. She had no idea what it meant to make an enemy out of someone who had once given her everything, and now had nothing left to lose. I didn't confront her the next day, or the day after that, or even the day after that. Confrontation is for men who still think they can salvage something, and I had already buried the marriage in my mind, stone cold and 6 feet under. Instead, I became a ghost in my own home, a silent observer, cataloging every slip, every rehearsed excuse, every twitch of guilt she thought she was hiding. My first move was simple. I told her I wanted us to reconnect, that maybe we could start sharing our calendars again like we used to when life got too busy, framed it as an innocent request, all in the name of healthy communication, and she agreed. A little too eagerly, probably thinking it would make me back off. Within hours, her appointments populated my phone, little breadcrumbs scattered for me to follow. It didn't take long to find the gaps, dinners that ran 3 hours longer than any meal should, meetings scheduled in places that didn't exist, yoga classes at studios I knew were closed for renovations. I never told her I knew. I let her pile lie upon lie, building herself a gallows one fake yoga mat at a time. I watched her pack gym bags that stayed pristine and untouched, full of neatly folded clothes that never smelled of sweat when she came home. I took quiet inventory of every fabricated excuse and filed it away, each one a weapon I would sharpen later. I started testing her responses, laying tiny verbal traps like poison bait, mentioning places we had talked about visiting recently and watching her blank expression stumble before she scrambled to agree. A normal man would have checked her phone again, but that wasn't my style, too messy, too easy to dismiss as paranoia if she caught me. No, I aimed higher. I went after her best friend, the one she claimed to be spending all her self-care nights with. It was almost laughably easy, a simple search through Venmo, a public transaction labeled, "Thanks for covering dinner, girl," on a night she told me they were just staying in with wine and movies. Dinner, paid for by her best friend, at a restaurant halfway across town. Curious, I checked the restaurant's social media page, and there they were, a group photo of a birthday celebration I hadn't been invited to, my wife in the background with her arms suspiciously tucked around a man who was definitely not her coworker. Still, no anger. Only data. Cold, emotionless dots connecting into a map I could navigate blindfolded. Next, I planted a seed. I casually suggested we get a couple's gym membership, something new to do together, I said, forcing a tight, artificial excitement into my voice, and the way she panicked, stammered about needing her own space, practically sprinted to shut down the idea. Told me everything I needed to know. I booked a consultation anyway, under a fake name, at the same gym she had listed on one of her fake calendar entries. I sat in the parking lot during her supposed sessions, watching, waiting, engine humming like a lazy predator in the dark, and sure enough, she never showed. Not once. Meanwhile, I reviewed our joint bank accounts, the ones she thought I barely checked because she handled the day-to-day bills. There, in between Target runs and grocery trips, were charges she couldn't explain, boutique hotel stays, upscale dinners for two, Uber rides ending at apartments she had no business visiting. I built a spreadsheet in secret, documenting every transaction, every lie, cross-referencing dates and times with her calendar entries until the pattern screamed at me from the screen. Still, I said nothing. Let her dig deeper. Let her hand me the bullets I would one day fire. I ordered a delivery of flowers to her office, a surprise, thinking of you gift, and when the florist called me 3 hours later to tell me no one by that name worked there anymore, that she had left the company 2 months ago, I thanked them kindly. Hung up the phone, and smiled for the first time in weeks. She wasn't just lying to me. She was lying to everyone. And with every false word, she was walking herself closer to the edge of a cliff she didn't even know existed. She still came home every night, humming tunelessly, pretending she was just tired from work, throwing her arms around me with an affection so hollow I was surprised it didn't echo. She thought she was winning. She thought she had me wrapped in confusion, guilt, self-doubt. What she didn't know was that every step she took was exactly where I needed her to go. Every fake smile, every false excuse, every late-night shower to wash the stress away was another nail hammered into her own coffin. I was no longer her husband. I was her executioner, watching from the shadows, patient, merciless, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It happened at a charity gala, the kind she used to beg me to attend just so she could parade around in overpriced dresses and feel like royalty for a night. And I had always obliged, smiling for the cameras, shaking hands with people I despised. Pretending we were the perfect couple everyone thought we were, it was almost poetic that it would end here, under chandeliers and false laughter, amidst clinking glasses and hollow applause. I had invited her weeks in advance, sweetly insisting it would be good for us to be seen together again, knowing she couldn't resist the attention, and she had accepted without hesitation, thrilled at the chance to flaunt herself like a prize. She spent the whole afternoon preparing, agonizing over her dress, her shoes, her hair, wanting everything to be just right, never suspecting that the whole evening had been meticulously designed as the stage for her final unmasking. We arrived arm in arm, a picture of marital bliss, smiling for the photographers, waving at acquaintances, weaving through the crowd of donors and executives like a royal couple presiding over their fiefdom. I kept my hand on her lower back, guiding her from group to group, charming, laughing, playing the part so flawlessly that even she relaxed, convinced she had nothing to fear. And then, halfway through the evening, as the auctioneer called for everyone's attention to introduce the night's entertainment, I gave a subtle nod to the AV technician I had paid off earlier, and the screen that had been showing sponsor logos flickered, stuttered, and came alive with something else entirely. The room fell silent as the first image filled the screen. Her, unmistakably her, laughing too intimately with a man none of these people knew, a man whose hand lingered on her hip, whose mouth brushed against her ear in a way no husband would tolerate. The slideshow played on, frame after damning frame, her betrayal immortalized in high definition, stolen kisses, whispered promises, hotel lobbies at midnight, until there was no longer any room for doubt. A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by the low murmur of scandalized whispers, and beside me, she froze, the blood draining from her face so fast I thought she might faint. She turned to me, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing like a drowning fish, and croaked out the first pathetic defense, "It's not what it looks like." I tilted my head slightly, studying her like a biologist observing a dying specimen, and said nothing, letting the silence strip her bare. She tried again, voice trembling. "We were just talking. It wasn't anything serious," but her eyes betrayed her, darting around the room, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. I leaned in close enough for only her to hear and said quietly, "You're insulting yourself more than you're insulting me." That knocked the wind out of her. She blinked rapidly, lips trembling, and then, as expected, came the justifications. "You were never around. You were always working. I felt so alone. I needed someone to talk to, someone who actually listened," she babbled, the words tripping over themselves in their desperate race to rewrite history. I let her flail, let her drown, my expression calm, detached, as if I were watching a stranger humiliate herself. Then she shifted to the next predictable phase, blame. Her voice sharpened, took on an edge, her pride bleeding through the cracks in her panic. "You pushed me into this," she hissed, low and venomous. "You made me feel invisible. You never appreciated me." I let her hang herself with her own words, never interrupting, never rising to the bait, just watching, always watching. Finally, when it became clear that none of her tricks were working, her face twisted into something ugly, something sneering and defiant. "You think you're so clever," she spat, "but you're pathetic. Everyone knows marriages fail. You're not special. You're just another sad, boring husband who couldn't keep his wife interested." Her voice was loud now, enough that the nearest tables had turned to watch, some with pity, others with morbid fascination. I smiled then, a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes, and said, still softly, still without a shred of anger, "You traded loyalty for attention, commitment for flattery, love for convenience. You sold yourself cheap to a man who won't even remember your name when the novelty wears off." She paled even further, if that was possible, and for the first time real fear flickered in her eyes, raw and naked. She had expected fury, shouting, a scene she could twist into sympathy. She had not prepared for a man who refused to bleed when she cut him. She opened her mouth to say something. I could see the desperate scramble in her mind for a new tactic, but no words came out. The room was heavy with tension, the kind of suffocating stillness that comes just before a building collapses, and I didn't move, didn't speak again, simply stood there with her, letting her twist in the noose she had so eagerly woven. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. She tried to recover first with a shaky laugh, like the whole thing was some big misunderstanding, as if the crowd hadn't just seen her paraded in her own shame. But the moment she caught sight of my face, utterly impassive, not angry, not hurt, just detached. Like she was a stranger on a street I would never think of twice, something inside her snapped. Her smile collapsed, and she lunged into the next tactic. Words spilling out fast and venomous. You smothered me. You controlled everything. You made me feel like a prisoner in my own life. She said it loudly, viciously, as if trying to shift the narrative, make herself the victim before anyone else could process what they had seen. But I didn't even blink. I just tilted my head slightly, a small, curious gesture. The kind you give a broken machine still twitching on the floor. She flinched at that. I saw it, and rushed forward with another swing, desperate, cruel. You were boring. You lived like an old man. I needed something real, something exciting. Her voice cracked midway, the pitch climbing. Her face flushed red with the kind of panic that doesn't come from guilt but from losing control. I let her scream into the silence like a madwoman, let the words ricochet off the marble walls and polished floors, watched the room subtly pull away from her like a body recoiling from a corpse, and when she finally stopped, breathless and trembling, waiting for me to fight back, I simply said, "Then why didn't you just leave?" It was a question without malice, asked in the same tone you might use to ask a waiter for the time, and the simplicity of it hit her harder than any accusation could have. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, but nothing came out, and so she pivoted, fast, wild-eyed, clawing at anything she could use. "This is your fault," she spat, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "If you had been a real man, if you had paid attention, if you had made me feel like a woman, this wouldn't have happened." I let her words hang there, ugly and flailing, before I leaned in just enough for her to hear and said, "Real women don't need to crawl into someone else's bed to feel seen." I watched her mouth twist, saw the brief flash of humiliation flash like a knife behind her eyes, and knew then that nothing she said would ever land, not anymore, because she wasn't arguing with a man trying to save the wreckage. She was screaming at a ghost who had already walked away. She tried another angle, her voice cracking into a sob, tears springing into her eyes like she could cry her way out of it now. "I was so lonely," she whispered, making her lip tremble with practiced ease. "I waited for you to notice, I tried to tell you." But there was no conviction in it, no real sorrow, only the hollow performance of someone who had gotten away with lies for so long they forgot how to tell the truth. I didn't offer comfort, didn't even offer cruelty. I simply said, "You didn't wait. You replaced." And there it was, the final collapse, the moment she realized that no amount of screaming, crying, or rewriting history would change the fact that I had stopped caring. The moment I understood exactly who she was. Her face crumbled, her hand shook, she sputtered half-formed insults that died on her lips, and in that silent battlefield between us, the shift was undeniable. She was scrambling in the dirt while I stood clean above her. The guests had edged away now, a wide ring of discomfort around us, pretending to sip drinks and check phones, trying not to stare but unable to look away from the slow-motion disaster unfolding in front of them. She tried one last time, her voice shrill with rage and terror. "You think you're better than me? You think you're so perfect? You're nothing without me. Nothing." And this time, I allowed myself a small smile, cold and final, before answering with absolute calm, "Then why are you the one begging?" She reeled back like I had struck her, and for a long, agonizing moment, she just stood there, trembling, broken, trying to summon the venom that once would have cowed me, trying to summon a weapon that no longer existed. I didn't say anything else. I didn't have to. Every second of my silence was another nail in her coffin, every unbothered breath another reminder that she had no more power here. She was fighting a war that had already been lost, and she knew it. God, did she know it? The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on, the room buzzing with the electricity of something irreversible, and yet I stayed rooted there, watching her disintegrate, letting the weight of her own failure crush her inch by inch. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Let her drown a little longer. Let her finally feel the cold. The beauty of revenge is not in the explosion. It's in the slow, meticulous dismantling, the quiet clicks of the trap closing when the prey still believes she has room to run. I didn't waste a second after that gala night. I moved in silence, surgical, methodical, erasing her from my life like deleting a corrupted file from a hard drive. First, I gathered everything, every message, every photo, every receipt, every timestamp lie she had ever fed me, neatly organized in folders both physical and digital, complete with backups stored on encrypted drives and in cloud accounts she didn't even know existed. I made copies, not for pleading or confrontation. I didn't need her admission, but for the divorce proceedings that were already quietly underway. My lawyer, a shark with a mind as cold as mine, received the first package of evidence with no fanfare. We agreed that my approach would be full custody of the dog, financial restitution, and the maximum separation of assets possible, all under the airtight terms of a prenuptial agreement she had once laughed off and signed without reading. At the same time, I systematically stripped her of access to anything that connected us financially. I opened a new bank account, redirected my paychecks, removed her name from every credit card that I had opened, froze the ones we shared, and ensured the utilities, leases, and subscriptions were all transferred into her name or canceled outright. The car she drove, a gift from me paid in full under my name, was quietly reclaimed. A simple call to the dealership, and it was towed from her office parking lot before lunch one afternoon. Her face must have been a masterpiece when she stepped outside and found nothing but an oil stain and a note from the dealership saying ownership dispute, under review. But that was just the beginning. I contacted her employer through a carefully composed, utterly professional email, no drama, no accusations. Simply forwarding them documentation that their employee had been using company resources to orchestrate an extramarital affair that involved clients and compromised sensitive information. I wasn't vindictive about it. I just let the facts speak louder than outrage ever could. HR departments don't like liabilities with smiling faces. I didn't need to destroy her job. I just needed to open the door and let her self-destruction walk through it. Meanwhile, I reached out to her parents, her siblings, even her two best friends, all under the guise of heartfelt honesty, presenting the irrefutable truth with an apology for the pain it would cause. I didn't embellish. I didn't rant. I simply let them see her for what she really was, and watched from the sidelines as the social scaffolding she had leaned on her whole life crumbled underneath her. Invitations dried up. Calls stopped coming. Birthdays, holidays, weekend brunches. All the little social rituals she fed off to validate herself evaporated like mist in the morning sun. While she spent her days trying to claw her way back into the good graces of the people she had betrayed, I made sure every legal move was timed to hit with maximum precision. Serving her with divorce papers at her new temp job, the one she had scrambled to get after the quiet termination from her old position, ensuring that the humiliation was private enough not to be actionable, but public enough to leave a stain she couldn't scrub out. She didn't even see it coming. She still thought there was time to spin, to manipulate, to salvage something. But every door she tried to open was already locked, every escape route bricked up behind her. She still tried to reach out, of course, still tried to bait me into a conversation, a fight, an explanation, pathetic little texts about working things out and healing, desperate half-apologies followed by passive-aggressive barbs. But I didn't respond. Silence was my final cruelty, the denial of the stage she so desperately craved to act out her victimhood. I wasn't giving her the luxury of closure or conflict, only the slow, dawning realization that she had burned every bridge she thought she could cross back over. And through it all, I didn't raise my voice, didn't show my hand, didn't give her a single moment of emotional satisfaction. I moved through the endgame with the same calm I had shown that night at the gala. Every step another checkmate, she hadn't even noticed being played. She thought she was a queen on the board, untouchable, powerful, adored. She didn't realize until too late that she had been a pawn from the very first move, and I had already removed her from the game before she even knew she'd lost. It happened 2 weeks after the papers were served, at a party she hadn't known I would be attending, a mutual friend's engagement celebration packed with all the people she used to charm with effortless lies, all the people who now saw her for exactly what she was. I showed up early, dressed in a suit sharp enough to cut glass, perfectly composed, perfectly indifferent, and when she walked in, clinging to the arm of her affair partner like some grotesque mockery of our old life, the whole room seemed to freeze for just a fraction of a second, as if the air itself recoiled from her. She didn't notice at first, too busy putting on that same brittle smile, the one she had practiced so many times in the mirror when she thought no one was watching. But the cracks were already there, lurking under the surface, waiting for the right moment to split her wide open. She greeted people with a laugh too loud, hugs too tight, pretending nothing had changed. But the reception was different now. Tight smiles, cold eyes, conversations that ended the moment she walked away. People pulled their hands back faster, turned their bodies away slightly, glanced over her shoulder toward me with small nods of understanding. She wasn't the main character anymore. She was the scandal everyone pitied or despised, the cautionary tale no one wanted to be associated with. It didn't take long before her new boyfriend started to notice, too. The whispers, the pointed looks, the strained half-smiles from people who knew exactly what kind of woman he had shackled himself to. I watched from a distance as one of my friends, once hers, now firmly on my side, casually passed him a phone, let him scroll through the neatly organized gallery of texts, screenshots, and photos, every filthy lie, every betrayal spelled out with date stamps and time codes he couldn't deny. I watched the color drain from his face in real time, watched him stiffen, jaw tightening, hands shaking slightly as he shoved the phone back with a muttered curse and turned on her like a sudden storm. She tried to laugh it off at first, a tinkling, desperate sound, reaching for his hand with that same fake tenderness she had once used on me. But he recoiled like she was something diseased, and right there, in front of everyone, he hissed something at her. I didn't catch all of it, but I caught enough. You're not who you pretend to be. You're disgusting. And then he left her standing there, alone, under the hot, pitiless gaze of an entire room that had already judged her and found her wanting. She looked around, wild-eyed, searching for someone, anyone to save her, to take her side, but all she found were polite, tight-lipped smiles, people pretending to check their phones, couples whispering behind cupped hands, friends she had thought were loyal slipping away into safer conversations. She spotted her best friend, the one who had once covered for her lies, vouched for her, and made a beeline toward her, babbling, pleading, grasping. But the friend held up one hand, palm out, and simply said, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "You made your choices. Now live with them." That stopped her cold, mid-sentence, mid-breath, and for a moment she just stood there, mouth hanging open, blinking as if the world had suddenly tilted under her feet. And through it all, I stayed where I was, calm, composed, a glass of whiskey in one hand, not smiling, not frowning, just watching. She saw me then, really saw me, and the last of her false bravado collapsed like a sandcastle under a black tide. Her face crumpled, her mouth working silently for a few seconds before she stumbled toward me, eyes wide, hands outstretched as if she could somehow reach across the chasm she had dug with her own treachery. "Please," she choked out, voice breaking, tears sliding down her perfectly contoured face. "Please, can we just talk?" Her mascara was already running, her lipstick smudged, the pristine mask she had spent so long crafting melting under the weight of her own shame, and for a long, exquisite moment, I simply looked at her, letting her feel the full force of my indifference, letting her drown in the silence that spoke louder than any words ever could. She reached for my arm, desperate, broken, but I stepped back, not harshly, not cruelly, just enough to let her know she no longer had the right to touch me. The rejection hit her like a slap. She staggered back a step, letting out a small, pitiful noise, the kind you hear from wounded animals who finally understand no one is coming to save them. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. My presence was a verdict. My silence was a sentence. She had spent so long weaving lies, building fantasies, manipulating everyone around her into props for her personal drama, and now, with no one left to applaud, no one left to believe her, she was finally alone with the truth she had tried so hard to outrun. I watched her crumble, watched the humiliation wash over her in waves, watched the tiny, involuntary tremors start in her hands and ripple through her entire body, and I stayed, rooted like a stone in the river, unmoved, unaffected, undeniable. The room had gone deathly still, all eyes flickering between us, but I felt no shame, no pity, no regret, only the cold, clean satisfaction of a man who had won not by striking harder, but by letting his enemy fall under the weight of her own sins. And I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. Let her stand there in the ruins a little longer. Let her finally taste the life she had so eagerly, so recklessly, chosen. She chased after me the moment she realized I wasn't going to stay frozen in place for her pity party, grabbing my arm with a desperation that turned heads around the room, and before I could shake her off, The dam inside her broke and the words came pouring out, loud and ragged, slashing through the polite murmurs like a blade. "You can't just walk away. You don't get to leave me like this," she screamed, voice cracking, and the crowd, already on edge, pressed in closer, sensing blood. I turned slowly, giving her the full weight of my stare, letting the silence stretch long enough for the people around us, her parents, my sister, her former friends, to close in, drawn by the magnetic pull of an unraveling disaster. "Walk away," I said, voice low and steady. "You burned everything to the ground, and now you're angry I don't want to stand in the ashes with you?" Her face twisted, red blotches blooming across her skin, and she lashed back without thinking. "You were never there for me. You made me feel invisible. But I cut her off with a sharp laugh, not cruel, just utterly disbelieving, and that single sound sliced through her words like a guillotine. "Invisible," I said, my voice rising just enough to carry over the stunned crowd. "You had a man who built a life around you, who carried you when you were weak, who celebrated you when you succeeded, who forgave every selfish tantrum, every petty cruelty, and you threw it away for a few compliments from a man who doesn't even know your middle name." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Her father stepped forward, his mouth a grim line. Her mother's hand clutched at her chest like she couldn't breathe. Her friends exchanged wide-eyed glances, some already backing away as if proximity to her might infect them. She turned in a circle, wild and cornered, trying to rally someone, anyone to her side, but no one moved. Not one soul. "It wasn't like that," she shouted, voice shrill now, panic bleeding into every word. "You pushed me into it. You're not some saint. You're cold. I stepped closer, and she flinched as if she expected a blow, but I didn't raise a hand, didn't even lift a finger. I just stared at her until her words dried up and the truth hung naked between us. "I was cold," I said, each word like a hammer, because I had nothing left to give a woman who already sold her soul for attention. "You didn't need love. You needed an audience." There was a pause, a heavy, suffocating silence, and then someone, I think it was her own brother, muttered under his breath, "Wow," and the sound of it, that small sound of disgust, made her whole body stiffen like she had been slapped. Her former affair partner, the man she had thrown our life away for, stood awkwardly near the exit, looking everywhere but at her, edging toward the door like a rat trying to escape a sinking ship. She saw him too, and with a sudden surge of venom, she screamed, "You're all hypocrites. All of you. You don't understand what it's like. I gave everything to him." She pointed at me, voice cracking with the raw, ugly truth of it, and he still made me feel like nothing. Her mother turned away then, openly weeping, her father just shaking his head in silent disbelief, my sister crossing her arms, lips pressed into a thin line of contempt. I let the silence burn for a few seconds more before delivering the final cut, my voice calm, cold, final. "You didn't feel like nothing because of me. You felt like nothing because deep down, you knew that no amount of praise, no amount of love, would ever be enough to fill the hole you carved into yourself." Her knees buckled slightly, her hand reaching for a nearby table to steady herself, but no one moved to help. Not one single hand stretched out for her. Not even the man she had thought would be her escape. Phones were out now. I saw flashes in the corners of my vision, people capturing the moment her entire illusion shattered, preserving her fallen pixels in memory. She opened her mouth again, but no sound came out this time, only a choked, broken gasp like the last whimper of a dying animal. I stood there for a moment longer, surveying the wreckage, the woman who had once smirked so confidently now reduced to a trembling mess under the cold, unforgiving eyes of the people she had deceived. Then, without a word, I turned on my heel and walked away, the crowd parting before me like a tide, the heavy, stunned silence following me like a crown. I didn't have to look back. I knew she was still standing there, crumbling piece by piece, watching me leave with everything she thought she could destroy still intact, my dignity, my name, my soul, while she was left with nothing but the ruins she had built with her own hands. After everything came crashing down, her life didn't implode all at once. It rotted from the inside out, slow and excruciating, like a house eaten away by termites until the whole structure collapsed under its own emptiness. She tried, at first, to pretend it hadn't changed, showing up to the same cafes, the same yoga classes, the same charity events, flashing her brittle smile like a mask that might still fool someone if she just wore it long enough. But no one looked at her the same anymore. Friends she used to gossip with now crossed the street to avoid even saying hello. The baristas who once scribbled hearts on her coffee cups now served her in stiff, wordless transactions. Her social media accounts turned into barren wastelands, Posts flooded with silence, likes vanishing, comments drying up except for the occasional thinly veiled dig or passive-aggressive "hope you're doing okay" from people who no longer cared. The affair partner, her great escape, her whispered fantasy of a new, exciting life, had vanished like a ghost the second the reality of her exposure set in. No texts, no calls, not even a goodbye. He didn't want a woman who came with baggage. He wanted a secret, a thrill, and once the spotlight hit them, he ran like a rat from a sinking ship. Her job was next. HR didn't even pretend to hide it. After a review of professional conduct, she was asked to resign quietly to avoid public scandal. With no income, no connections, and no sympathy, she packed her things into boxes she couldn't afford to ship and moved 2 towns over, into a grimy little apartment above a gas station, where no one knew her name, and no one cared why she flinched every time her phone buzzed. Word still followed her, though. Rumors seeped through the cracks like smoke, and she changed jobs twice, each time falling lower, from a sleek marketing manager to a clerk folding cheap clothes in the back of a department store she once would have sneered at. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life brick by brick, quietly and steadily, surrounding myself with people who actually deserved a seat at my table, never once mentioning her name again. Until one night, months later, when my phone lit up with an unknown number and curiosity made me answer. It was her, voice raw, small, scraping against the silence like nails on glass. "I still love you," she whispered, as if saying it could conjure back the world she had destroyed. I was stupid. I was scared. I didn't know what I was doing. "Please. Can we just talk?" The words tumbled out in a rush, frantic and pitiful, the sound of a woman who had finally realized the ground was gone beneath her feet and no one was reaching out to catch her. She begged. She sobbed. She promised she had changed, that she had been lost, that she just needed one more chance to make it right. I listened, not because I cared, but because there was a certain cold, brutal satisfaction in hearing the downfall in her voice, the way her pride had been sandblasted into dust. When she finished, choking on her own tears, I stayed silent for a long moment, letting her feel the emptiness she had earned, and then I spoke 6 words, delivered without malice, without hatred, without any emotion at all. "Strange. I don't even remember your name." The sob that tore out of her then wasn't dramatic or theatrical, it was the quiet, broken sound of someone realizing the door had slammed shut forever and she was trapped outside in the freezing dark. I hung up without waiting for a reply, without looking back, without giving her another second of my life. Because that's what she was now. A ghost, a cautionary tale, a footnote in a story where the villain never even got a final act. And me? I kept walking forward, lighter than I had been in years, free of the rot she tried to plant inside me, knowing with absolute certainty that no matter where she ended up, she would never escape the life she had chosen. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Did you enjoy the journey? Let me know. I'd love to hear what you think.